Hello and welcome to the EU Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Baker, and today we're going to be talking about health preparedness and all that involves, be it finance under the new MFF, stockpiling or regulation. And joining me to discuss that, we're delighted to have Stine Bosse, MEP from the Renew Group and Vice Chair of the Santa Committee on Public Health here in the European Parliament, and also from EPC, the European Policy Centre, Michele, Migliori, who is a policy analyst with a specialisation in HERA and health. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let me start, Stine, with you and ask me to give you your evaluation of the current preparedness that we are in Europe, because we didn't necessarily see the COVID pandemic coming, but we have learned some lessons since then.
Sure. I mean, just to have some kind of comparison point, we are much better prepared today than before the COVID situation. But are we well enough prepared? I would put question marks to that, because we need to invest a lot more together. And if you think about preparedness, not only in the sort of crisis terms, but also in terms of what do we foresee, how does the future look like for us Europeans regarding our health? There is so much pressure on our healthcare systems from within, but also from the outside, especially from the US. And in that sense, I would say we need to do a lot more. We need to do it in many, many areas, not only in the risk and damage control areas, but also in the areas that we're working with currently with Biotech, and the whole sort of environment around our pharmaceutical sector. We really, really need to get our act together there.
I'm going to come back to you and ask you what you think we need to do more of in terms of coordination. But Michele, let me first turn to you. How do you assess our change in preparedness and perhaps our resilience as well?
Well, I think that what the MEP was saying is right. So if the question is, are we better prepared? The answer is yes. If the question was, are we prepared enough? Then there we have to discuss. But I think that if we compare the situation, especially when it comes to the legal framework, so what we had before with the decision 1082, which was the decision we used to address the COVID-19, and what we as the European Union put in place with the European Health Union initiative, I think that the situation is far way better. We have now, the health package provided 3 or 4 regulations that now are regulating the health field when it comes to cross-border health threats. So I think that there are a lot of good initiatives that the European Union put in place. For example, the Union Preparedness Plan, the new National Preparedness Plan, the Joint Procurement Initiative. Even if also on that, then we can say something more specific. And also the creation of the new DG HERA was something that I think drove the preparedness from being a fluffy word, let's say, to something which now is more strong, more clear within the European legal framework, and it became more or less a new category of the European policy. So, yeah, please.
Well, let's stay with this, the Health Emergencies Preparedness and Response Authority, so HERA. It's got this coordinating role. How well is it fulfilling it to date, and is it prepared for something? I mean, the idea is that it's preparing for crises, but are we really making the right assessments right now for what might be in the future?
I think that the creation of HERA was very important because what also the President von der Leyen said when she announced it, when she announced this initiative, was that we were missing the focus on what comes before the emergency. So, and also we have to keep in mind that everything we did it without changing the treaties. So it probably caused some coordination problems that, of course, are always the same. For example, we have some overlaps between the mandates of EMA, for example, HERA, and in general in the world of medical countermeasures. That's where it was very well addressed with the new legal framework. We still have some problems and some overlapping and some fragmentation, but in general, I think that the creation of HERA was something very, very important. also because if you don't spend enough money in the preparedness phase, it is clear, and COVID made clear that then you find yourself spending a lot more during or after the emergency.
So it's actually a smart use of money. We'll come on to funds in a moment. But as I said, let's stay with this idea of coordination. And Michele mentioned the joint procurement. He also mentioned the treaties. And I think the reason that's coming up is because traditionally health was a member state competence.
Sure.
And it was because of the crisis that we realized we are stronger and healthier together. So do you think we're in the right direction with that? I mean, particularly with things like joint procurement.
Yes, I do think, and I think the Critical Medicines Act actually showed us that, we are now much more aware that we need to do much more together, and that we also, in that sense of procurement, that we stand much stronger when we stand side by side. But I also want to reiterate that look at what's going on right now in Congo regarding Ebola, and the fact that we fast. And with sort of decided procedures, reacted, supported, and it was Spain that was sort of really on the spot there, wasn't it? And everybody came together and worked together. And right now, of course, there is still an alert, and we can trust, and this I feel very comforting, that there are agencies, there are people within the European Union that are working on this, that are monitoring this. And we have to bear in mind, the US redraw from the WHO, took away US aid like this. Everybody here in this house and in all the institutions said, this is rising the risks for us. And that's why it is so important that we actually have this much higher risk awareness, and that we also now can trust that the institutions are watching out, and even more important, that the countries are listening.
Well, all of this costs money, so let's move on to the funding questions around the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, or the EU budget. I mean, what should healthcare provisions look like in that?
Look, I mean, I'm very keen to make sure that, and I'm actually quoting now the Commissioner for Budgets. He said, and this was early in his mandate, mind you, but he said something I think was very wise. What we can do better and cheaper together, we must. And if that is our guiding principle, then there are, a pathway of things beyond also the direct preparedness for sort of more crisis-orientated incidents. But there's also rare diseases, rare cancers, centers of excellence where we can develop much better treatment, much faster access for every citizens in Europe. And that I think we really have to think carefully through. And my push would be also for the MFF to contain a lot more for healthcare. And of course, that's not replacing healthcare in the countries, but it is supporting us to make sure that the areas where we can do it better and can do it cheaper together, that's of course what we should do.
Michele, I mean, the funding is needed certainly for things like joint procurement, but also to drive innovation in the healthcare and the pharmaceutical sector. Where do you see the big emphasis? What is needed from your view?
Well, in general, I think that there's been quite an evolution in the European approach on health budget over the past 10 years, and I can see three clear moments that you can highlight in order to understand the shift. For example, in 2014, when health was still perceived as a weak competence, we can say, we had around 450 million budget. Then COVID happened, so we are in 2020, 2021, and after COVID, during and after COVID, it was perceived as a resilience policy. And now with the 2028 MFF, we are trying to perceive it as a competitiveness policy. Then the question is, if will health retain a sufficient attention and visibility within a much broader competitiveness fund? And this is not a nice to have, let's say, because health spending, lessons from COVID-19 show that health should not be perceived as a cost, but as an investment, especially when it comes to innovation. And also, it should be perceived as a driver for our companies, European companies, to scale in Europe and stay in Europe and make all the innovative medical countermeasures and pharmaceutical in general available for the wider population as possible when it comes to patients. So I think that we are moving from a resilience problem to a economic and competitiveness problem, and that's how China and US are seeing the pharmaceutical sector right now. And I think it's something that also the European Union should step up and implement.
When we talk about competitiveness, I often think, well, so who are we competing with? And in the short answer seems to be the US and China.
Yes.
How far behind are we in this race, or are we leading in some areas? Because there's a distinction between generics and pharmaceuticals and innovation.
Sure. No, I think the sad thing about this, but also the big possibilities, lay with the fact that many of the new ideas are actually born in Europe. We are very, very strong on innovation, on research, universities and so on. But we need the people who actually develop this to stay here, to want to build their businesses here. And that is where we're really facing a fierce competition from the US. We need to get our capital markets together. We need also to make sure that the most favored nation legislation that the US administration has put in place, which is a pure attack on our industry and also on our society model, that we have universal health care, and in the US it's a completely different story. So we have to defend our position. And I normally say this: if you look at the digital and if you look at the defense industry, both industries where we are really lacking. We are building up and we are building fast. But in the pharmaceutical sector, we are losing, but we are strong. But we are falling back. This is why this is the call for us to call for action. We cannot let go of our position. We should develop our position. Otherwise, we will look back and say, what were they thinking of? We had it, and we let go of it. So this is why the Biotech Act is so crucial, and we need to get it right so that we can defend our position globally.
But this isn't just about defending in terms of competitiveness, in terms of, if you like, a financial view. This is also about strategic autonomy.
Sure.
And there isn't oftentimes criticism of the speed of approval. We do hear some in the industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, in the medtech sector, saying that regulation slows things down.
Yeah.
Now, under COVID, we proved that we don't have to be slow.
No.
Where do we go? And is the Biotech Act the right approach? Is there room for more changes at a regulatory level that will improve?
Look, I think what is now on the table is good. And I really want to praise the fact that the Commission has been fast. I mean, they have really done a good job in this area, and it's needed. But I also want to say that we also need to go further. And one of the things that I will bring to the table on behalf of my group Renew is, of course, to think about the 28th regime within biotech. Not for all, but for, let's for example say rare diseases and rare cancers. Why is it that small innovative companies have to get an EMA approval and then they go around to 27 countries afterwards? That's slowing down processes dramatically. So why not have a feature where the EMA approval is an approval for, all countries? And if some countries wouldn't like that and they would not approve of that model, it could be an opt-in model. You could say, okay, we want to go for this. So I think there's a lot of things to be taken even further. And what I hear right now, there is also a positive reception of this in the Commission, and definitely also the coalition parties here in the Parliament.
Well, the so-called 28th regime is, of course, opt-in, and it's there so that companies don't have to go through the whole 27 member states. And it's an innovative idea that may suit many companies, but not necessarily all. We hear that there's a concern that regulation stifles innovation, and yet at the same time, Michele, that has to be balanced with safety, something we pride ourselves on here in the EU. What is that you're hearing at the EPC from industry regarding regulation in this sector?
Well, I think that in general, the role of the Biotech Act is to strengthen the European system and so reduce regulatory barriers, supporting the innovation, facilitating investments, and that for sure, I think we have two, from our perspective, two core points. One is clinical trials, because we benefit from a large patient population, strong hospitals, high quality medical expertise, but there's too much administrative complexity, as the MEP was saying, differences in the implementation when it comes to the 27 different member states procedures. And so streamlining the process is one of the key objectives. Then the second point, the second core point, is the investment and scale up, because we have to we perform good in supporting early stage innovation, especially through some European funds, for example, Horizon. The challenge is during later stages of development, when companies require a significant amount of money to go further. And so we have to expand operations, to do larger clinical trials, build manufacturing capacity and whatever, and also to provide to companies the right financial environment to scale up in Europe. But it's not all about the European initiative, it's also about the member states' initiative, and they have to streamline the processes also inside of their borders. And I wanted to say something about, from a more global health perspective, it's true that the US withdrew from the WHO. It's true that it's a problem when it comes to funds, when it comes to, in general, also the early detection of problems around health problems around the world. But it's also true that this should be a call for the European Union to stand up and fulfill the...
Of course.
Yeah. Fulfill
Definitely.
Sure. The space that the US were fulfilling, and I think that we are the right continent, the right union to do so, and we have all the capacity to do so.
Can I just have one comment on that? Because I totally agree, and this is why this 28th regime to speed up processes, because it's not there. I mean, it's there for other areas, but it's not there for the pharmaceutical area. And we need more cross-border trials to get really back on the track towards both US and China on this. And then just also one comment, to think differently. So also when we talk about the European Competitiveness Fund, we have pushed for also in the digital area, which is a window of its own, to think about health, to think about the ERN systems that we have, but that need further development, and think about the health data space, which we have, and which is a huge advantage for Europe, because we've got more health data because of our universal healthcare systems. So if we think a little bit more strategically and broad on these issues, we can take ourselves not just one step forward, but a whole leap forward.
Well, I want to wrap up then with a final thought, whether there's any areas. We've touched on that a lot. We haven't really talked so much about patient access, but I'm interested in your thoughts on who we need around the table in terms of stakeholders as we move forward. There are also other areas, things like antimicrobial resistance, where the EU could be playing a leading role, as you suggest. A final thought from you on where we should go next, and maybe where the gaps need to be filled still.
Well, on antimicrobial resistance, we are talking about the most important and dangerous silent pandemic going on around the world. I think that around the table we need the so-called holistic approach, so meaning for sure academics, for sure politicians, for sure member states, patients, but in general I think that we are facing a very difficult world in general, also when it comes to health, for all the reasons that we said until now. But I think that for the European Union, this is a huge opportunity to stand up, to use the immense amount of financial power that the European Union has and has to, unlock. And I think that also from a global perspective, a global health perspective, the European Union has a lot to say, and I'm sure that the European Parliament and member states will do the right thing.
And Stine, a final wrap up from you.
Yeah, I just want to connect to this antimicrobial resistance issue, because in the ECF, the Competitiveness Fund, the largest window is obviously defense. But here, and this is also recognized by NATO, the AMR, antimicrobial resistance, is a huge problem connected to war. So here we have also a push to get an investment from that fund to make sure that we can actually get a better grip on especially that situation. It is a slow pandemic, and it is something we have to deal with.
And so many of these areas are converging from technology to defence, all into health as well. Well, thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this EU Perspectives podcast. Please do keep an eye out for further policy reports and podcasts on this and other topics on EU Perspectives. But that's it for today.